And welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Forecast. And today we are wrapping up our week of Earth Day, carbon footprint, climate change, everything that we kind of experience around here in the Great Lakes, but also what we've been seeing around the world when it comes to our climate across not only the U.S., but across the entire world. So today we are going to be taking you into two very important things that we haven't mentioned much about this week. First is growing season. Meteorologist John Gross is going to talk to you about the growing season with everything coming into green, such as trees, and why they play such a big role. But also, what is a free source that helps these things green up so quickly? John will have that for you. Then, right after the break there, meteorologist John Gross will be back to talk to you about air quality, because air quality is a huge part of what we need to keep in mind, especially during the summer months when things start getting warmer. And if we have any wildfires or if there's just extremely warm temperatures and engines are running in bigger cities, yeah, that can lead to a very tough time for us. So meteorologist John Gross is going to break down air quality and why it's very important to keep that in the back of your mind when we get into those warmer months. And then we're going to take you into Viewer Question Friday, where you ask us some questions and we explain for you. We'll have that coming up at the end of the show. But before we get into all of that, let's get off the top of the show with some interesting facts. First off, this day in weather history. This day, April 25th, 1920, Atlanta, Georgia received 1.5 inches of snow and experienced their latest freeze on record with a morning low of 32 degrees. Now, mind you, here in northern Michigan, it is not out of the norm to see snow all the way through Mother's Day weekend, let alone freezing temperatures. We can get those in the beginning of June. But for Atlanta, Georgia, yeah, they don't usually see snow, let alone 1.5 inches, that late in April. So the high of 39 degrees that day was the only second time in recorded history of their Aprils that they had ever had a high under 40 degrees. Pretty wild. So again, 1.5 inches in Atlanta, Georgia. They experienced that was their latest freeze on record with a morning low of 32. And then the high of 39 that day that they experienced was only the second time in April that they had ever had a high under 40 degrees. Pretty wild. So 1920, Atlanta, Georgia. Now, trivia time. Yesterday, we asked you what country sees the most tornadoes. Is it the U.S., China, Spain, or India? Yeah, it's the U.S. Now, U.S. is very dynamic when it comes to our positioning, because what you need for tornadoes is that cold air, warm air. Now, when you look at the United States, we have that cold air sinking in from Canada right over the plains, and then we have that warm air moving in from the Gulf. And that sets up for severe weather and tornado outbreaks. Very, very common here in the U.S. Now, when you go across seas, it's a little bit different. You start looking at the topography of where these places are, the geography of them all. And India, yeah, you can see tornadoes, and they do see tornadoes across the world, but they're just not nearly as common, if you will, as the U.S. The U.S. is very common when it comes to tornadoes. Very unique, I should say. Today, we want to know, what is the most deadly type of weather in the United States, in America? Is it flooding, heat, tornadoes, or winds? QR code right there. Hit it with your phone, give you your answer. This one's a little bit tougher. What is the most deadly type of weather in America? Is it flooding, heat, tornado, or winds? And we'll have this answer for you Monday on Beyond the Forecast. Now, viewer photo of the day brought to you by Great Rooms. Today's picture, I can honestly say I never had seen this bird before, but this picture was sent in from Cheryl Goff today. And she sent in the picture and said, this is a common female merganser. And I was like, I don't know if I've ever seen one of these in the wild before. If I have, I guess I wasn't really paying attention. But it's an absolutely gorgeous bird. And I did a little bit of research because I was like, are these common? A little bit bigger than a mallard, a little bit smaller than a Canadian goose. So pretty cool. Thank you, Cheryl, for sending that picture in. And thank you to Great Rooms for sponsoring viewer photos. Now, coming up next, we're going to send it over to meteorologist John Gross, who's going to tell us about the growing season. Not so much about farming growing season, but everything starting to green up. Your grass, the leaves, everything starting to come back to life here in spring. But why? And why does it happen so quickly in some spots at times? We'll have all the details right after the break.
Hey there, everybody. Meteorologist John Gross, and today we are going to be talking about why essentially do we see things quote unquote greening up as we're getting into the growing season. We got to take you back to biology class. It is a process that is called photosynthesis. Essentially, it helps to feed any plants that we see outside, helping them thrive during the growing season. We have several of the components labeled here. You need the sun, you need sunlight, carbon dioxide, water's part of that equation, even glucose. But when you're talking about a pigment within the plant itself, in this example, our leaf, you're talking about a green pigment. That's called chlorophyll. Now, in our leaf, that essentially helps to trap the sunlight, and this essentially helps to make the food for the plant to thrive. The plant's eating good. Essentially is what's happening when you're seeing things look very green. You're talking about that high chlorophyll production within the plants, the trees, the grass, corn, anything outside during the growing season. So we'll stick to our leaf. You're still talking about other colors within the leaf too, yellows, oranges, even some browns too, but when you're talking about that peak chlorophyll production, that green pigment is going to be dominant. So that's why we see things essentially greening up, looking very, very green outside. When you're starting to get into the fall season, that chlorophyll production, it starts to slow down. And then that green pigment, it's not as dominant anymore. But you still do have other colors, especially here within our leaf, so those start to become more dominant. And that's when we can start to see those yellows, those oranges, those very vibrant reds that we love to see during the fall foliage. And it can look very, very pretty, but essentially the food that was being made for the leaf is slowing down. That chlorophyll production starts to slow down. So when we're in the growing season, that chlorophyll production, it's at its peak. So again, that's a big reason why you see the green. And another big reason why, at least when we were talking earlier, one of the main components you need is that sunlight. That chlorophyll traps that sunlight. That's what helps to grow our leaf. So when we're getting into the spring, early summer, our sun angle, it becomes higher up in the atmosphere. We're starting to get more of those direct rays, so we're getting more sunlight. Essentially, the plants take in more of that sunlight. Our chlorophyll production starts to increase, and then that's when we really start to see things quote unquote greening up. But something else that can help us out, especially in the springtime, when you talk about spring thunderstorms. One of the main things associated with a thunderstorm, lightning. And lightning and chlorophyll actually go hand in hand. I think this is a very cool phenomenon to know about, especially for farmers. Anything that helps to grow outside as you're getting into the spring and early summer months. Let's go ahead and talk about it. So you got a thunderstorm, lightning. And once we have that, that releases nitrogen into the atmosphere. Nitrogen is one of the most abundant elements we can talk about here on planet Earth. So once you have that nitrogen released, the nitrogen molecules, they start to combine with oxygen, the second most abundant element we have on Earth. And once those start to combine, those start to form what's called nitrates. So once we have the nitrates in play, the nitrates then can be absorbed by plant roots, essentially our leaf, and that is a crucial component to help the chlorophyll molecule thrive, or essentially grow. And once again, we have that chlorophyll production at its peak, then we start to trap more and more of that sunlight, and that is essentially how we can see things start to green up very, very quickly. Case in point, we had a few thunderstorms from this spring season just last week. And the day after we had it, a lot of thunderstorms that produced a lot of lightning. You noticed you went outside the next day and things started to look very, very green. That's that high chlorophyll production we're starting to see. So that also is a big indication to not only help, but get our growing season thriving and our plants, well, fed pretty well. I'm meteorologist John Gross reporting for Beyond the Forecast.
Thanks, John. And coming up after the break, John will be back to talk more about air quality and just how it impacts us here across the globe. We'll have all that coming up right after the break.
Hey there, everybody. Meteorologist John Gross, and today we are going to be talking about what exactly is air quality and what exactly does the air quality index mean to you and myself as far as how clean versus how, well, not clean the air is, and what exactly are we breathing in when we're talking about air quality alert days and when we're talking about the air quality index, otherwise known as AQI, getting above a certain threshold. So I want to go ahead and start with a photo. This was taken from the New York Times in New York City a few years back. As you can see, you're talking about very poor air quality here with those oranges and yellow looks to the sky within the air. This was a day in New York City when you were talking about the air quality index over 500. Now, to put that in perspective, we'll go over exactly what those numbers mean in just a sec, but as you're talking about the air quality index, when you start to get those numbers above 100, that's when it starts to become unhealthy pretty much for anybody who has a respiratory system, otherwise known as lungs, helping you breathe in air to pretty much keep yourself alive. So not good news when you're talking about the air quality looking scenes like this. So again, AQI, that is the short algorithm for what we're talking about and what we mean by air quality index. So that is the indicator of air pollutants and the health effects that come along with when you're talking about poor air quality. So here's the charts, and here's a look at those numbers. Remember, we were talking about over 500 in that photo we showed you into New York City. When you start to get those numbers above 300, that's at the highest category you can get, pretty much just meaning you're talking about very hazardous conditions. Now, when you have the numbers anywhere from 100 or less, that's what we call acceptable. And usually within a normal day, you're talking about those numbers anywhere from 50 to near 100. But once you start to get the numbers above 100, that's when it starts to become unhealthy, especially right there, 100, 150, even towards 200. That's when we have to start talking about sensitive groups, pretty much meaning if you have asthma, if you have respiratory issues, or at least pre-existing respiratory issues, not a good idea to be venturing outside or just taking a walk or a run. It's a better idea to make sure you're protecting yourself and staying indoors where you can control how the air is being circulated within wherever you might be living. Now, here's a look at the 5 main pollutants that we do talk about when the air quality can become very, very bad, depending on where exactly you're located. And those 5 include ground level ozone. You're also talking about particulate pollution that can just come from any car. You're also talking about carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide. Again, those are the 5 main pollutants that we look at, or at least environmentalists look at, determine how clean the air actually is. So things that can happen when you're talking about air quality not looking the best, otherwise known as an air quality alert day. We can talk about air quality alerts being issued even by the National Weather Service. So here's a look at some of the side effects that you probably can obtain or at least suffer from if you are experiencing a poor air quality day and you happen to be outside for a longer period of time. You can even talk about headaches. You can talk about irritated eyes, sinus congestion. You can also talk about fatigue, difficulty breathing, just a lot of those particulates in the atmosphere. You also could talk about chest pains, asthma attacks, especially if you have pre-existing asthma or respiratory issues, irritations within your throat, or even increased coughing. Those are main things that, unfortunately, we see as side effects with us humans, or even animals as well, when you're talking about poor air quality. So what can you do to prevent yourself from experiencing some of those side effects if we're talking about a poor air quality day? Well, staying informed with the Environmental Protection Agency, otherwise known as the EPA, the National Weather Service, or people like myself, letting you know if we have air quality alerts in play for a certain day or a time frame, trying to just limit the amount of time that you are spending outdoors. Again, keeping yourself within an environment where you can control how the air is being circulated. If you have a dehumidifier, if you're talking about closing the windows, making sure that you're keeping a lot of that outside air from getting inside. Another good tip is if you have to travel anywhere, there usually is a button now on many vehicles that allows you to keep the air circulating within the cabin versus bringing outside air into your vehicle. So that's another way to keep the outside air from intruding wherever you might be. Minimizing gas-powered equipment and vehicles to make sure that you're not contributing to the poor air quality that is already existing. as well as just trying not to burn anything, causing any smoke to be released into the atmosphere that can make the air quality just that much worse, and making sure that you're able to just breathe normally and healthy. I'm meteorologist John Gross for Beyond the Forecast.
Thanks, John. Now, coming up next, we sit down with meteorologist Haley Fischetti and break down a section of our live streaming podcast for you. We'll have that coming up right after the break. And welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Forecast. It is Friday, which means it's Viewer Question Friday. You have all been submitting questions just asking certain things, whether it's weather-related or maybe a little more science-related, for us to explain some things. And as we get them in, we're like, actually, that's a really good idea to explain that. So we have a lot of questions that have come in, and we're going to continue to hold on to them and explain them, whether they're in the show itself or if we're just saving them for Viewer Question Friday. Now, this one has very little to do with science, very little to do with weather, but someone asked, how do you guys forecast and do your job? Well, I did a video on this a few months ago to kind of show the magic that is TV broadcasting or broadcast meteorology. Now, we do our own forecasts, and this is green screen. You'll see that in the video. But we do all our own forecasts, and we put them together in a fancy slideshow that we sit here and move the graphics, and that's our story. That's what we talk about. We don't read a teleprompter. We don't relay someone else's forecasts. We make our own. And that's what our team does here. But we kind of go in depth about how it's all done. Check it out. This might look like a broadcast, but no, this is one of our videos that I'm going to show you. This is more of the TV background. So this is what you see when you see us at home broadcasting and I'm giving you a forecast. But this is what it really looks like. Yeah, giant green screen. And some may say, well, how do you know what you're pointing at? Great question. So when I'm staring straight at the camera ahead of me, I have two screens, and they flip the teleprompter back and forth for that, which we'll show you here in a second. But I have a monitor to my right, a monitor to my left, and two in front of me. So I'll go grab this camera and I'll show you. So you can see that the green screen's right there. But when you take a look here, this is what I'm looking at. So there you go. And and there's you. So I have two monitors there that I can look at. I have a monitor to my right that I can look at. I have a monitor to my left. So when you see me on TV, so we'll move this over here so you can't see it. So when you see me on TV and I'm looking at, it looks like I'm looking at the map, 75 in Newberry, 77 in Grayling, 80 in Traverse City, I'm looking at that monitor over there. Or when I'm looking at you at home, making that connection, I can say 75 in Newberry, 75 in Cadillac, 80 in Traverse City, 79 in Mount Pleasant. So there you go. That's kind of how the green screen magic works. And then they do all the fancy stuff in the back. But that's also why I have two mics. But that's kind of how the TV magic works. So what you see at home, yeah, it's kind of blinders, if you will. So when you take a look at what's actually behind the studio, very different. And the forecasting of it all, like temperatures, like when you see right here, that's all relayed information from the airports. Those are all temperatures. We don't put those in, but everything that is like the 7-day forecast, tonight's forecast, tomorrow's forecast, all of that we put in by hand, and we make our own forecast. We are not just spewing out words that someone has put together. No, we make our own forecast. So we'll come in at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we'll sit down, look at all the upper atmospheric conditions that are going on, the patterns that are going on, and we make our own forecast. And we implement that here in what is really just a fancy slideshow for you all. In fact, I'll show you. Come with me. So here, for all you 90s babies, it's like a fancy PowerPoint. So we put in all the information in all of our slides, and then we put it in the show and press play. So yeah, there's a bunch of different slides. And trust me when I say I actually have a very small show compared to other people, but this is where we put everything in, and this is where we would edit it and then put all the information in so that we have all the temperatures, all the information for you and forecast. So there you go, a little information for you today. And it wasn't so much science, a little bit weather related, but it was more actually TV related. Pretty cool. But thank you for joining us today on Beyond the Forecast. We do appreciate it. And thank you for joining us this week. Hopefully we could teach you a little bit of something, maybe spark a little something off in your mind that says, I got to research that and do a little science, do a little weather research. And hopefully what came back was Huh, interesting. So thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. For meteorologist John Gross, as well as meteorologist Haley Fischetti, I am Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens. Be good, stay safe, take care, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday for more Beyond the Forecast. Bye, everybody.